Hey folks, Nick here from another BookTube channel, and today I'll be reviewing Do a Powerbomb by Daniel Warren Johnson. This is a recent miniseries comic published by Image that ran for 7 issues. I picked up the first issue from my LCS when it first came out, and I really liked what I saw, and I decided to wait for the trade paperback to read the whole thing all at once. So, did the entire series impress me as much as that first issue? Let's get into it. Lona Steelrose wants to be a professional wrestler, but she's living under the shadow of her mother, Yua, who was one of the best to ever do it. When Lona was just a little girl, Yua was killed in a terrible accident in the ring when her opponent, Cobra's son, slipped and botched a dangerous maneuver. Years later, Lona is still pursuing her goal despite her father's pleas that she not follow in her mother's footsteps. One day, Lona is presented with an unbelievable opportunity. A necromancer that is obsessed with wrestling across various dimensions and planets is putting together a tag team tournament of the best fighters that the universe has to offer. The grand prize? The winner gets to choose a loved one to resurrect from the dead. Lona teams up with Cobra's son to enter the tournament in hopes of bringing Yua back to life. To paraphrase The Rock, Do a Powerbomb is the most electrifying comic about sports entertainment that I have ever read. This book is absolutely crackling with energy in every panel, and it's contagious. After reading this, I wanted to jump off my dresser and drop an elbow onto my bed. But I am over 30 years old, and doing so would likely hospitalize me. It's clear Daniel Warren Johnson is a wrestling fan, and he captures the energy of the ring perfectly here. His fight sequences are kinetic, sometimes ridiculous, and often awe-inspiring. It's also very clear that he designed this comic so that he'd be able to draw wrestling matches featuring any type of character he wanted to draw. He probably just thought to himself one day, you know what? I want to draw a human wrestling an orangutan. And so, he drew a human wrestling an orangutan. That's the beauty of creator-owned comics. You make the rules, and your own limit is your own imagination. But Daniel Warren Johnson doesn't ignore good storytelling just to draw his awesome fights. Do a Powerbomb is a surprisingly emotional comic because every fighter, not just the Lona and Cobra's son tag team, are fighting for the opportunity to bring someone back to life. Johnson gives us several scenes that are behind the kayfabe so that even the heel wrestlers have a sad story to tell. It's an interesting way to play with the dynamic that all of these wrestlers have to embody a role for the audience, and it often makes people forget that they have their own lives. This is explored in a really funny way early on when Lona asks the necromancer who is going to win the tournament. And he says, well, what are you talking about? I have no idea. That's the whole point. And then Lona says, but pro wrestling is scripted. The outcome is predetermined. To which the necromancer starts cracking up because he thinks that she's pulling his leg. It's a moment that really made me laugh, but it also works to up the stakes of the story as our human characters who are used to pulling their punches suddenly find themselves in very real physical danger. There's also a reveal at the end of issue 2 that was so surprising to me that I actually literally gasped. Do you know how many times in my life I've genuinely gasped? Characters in like movies and books are always gasping when they see something surprising, but in real life, when you're surprised by something, it's usually just like, or maybe like if it's a really big surprise, you do one of these like. To have an actual involuntary like is not something that I think happens in real life that often, at least not to me. So to see that happen in this story, it was kind of a weird feeling, honestly. I mentioned I picked up the first issue off the stands, but I waited for the trade to read the whole story, and I'm glad I did because the paperback edition comes with some extra material where you can see Johnson's sketches. My favorite bits are these inserts in between issues where you see his inked artwork scanned from the actual physical art. So you can see like his blue line underdrawing and his use of whiteout for, accenting a certain action. My favorite thing I caught was in this piece here, where if you look closely at Cobra Sun's left foot, it looks like Johnson didn't like the original drawing, so he pasted over it with a piece of paper with the redraw. I love seeing process stuff like that, and it makes me glad I waited for the trade. Do a Powerbomb is fast-paced entertainment that delivers high-flying thrills and action, balanced with a bittersweet emotional story. It's books like this that remind me why I love comics in the first place. My arbitrary and subjective grade for Do a Powerbomb is 10 out of 10, no notes. Do with that what you will. If you've read this series, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. Thank you for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.